The clock on the clubhouse wall ticked past midnight, its hands glowing faintly under the dim neon sign that read, "Iron Vow Riders." Outside, the desert wind howled like a distant warning, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and engine oil through the cracked windows. Inside, the air was thick with the remnants of the night's gathering, cigar smoke curling lazily toward the rafters, the low murmur of voices fading as the last few brothers nursed their beers. Troy Atlas Maddox sat at the scarred oak bar, his broad shoulders hunched over a half-empty glass, the weight of old scars pulling at him like invisible chains. At 45, with a beard streaked in silver and tattoos mapping battles long buried, Troy had built this club as a fortress for the broken, a place where promises weren't just words, but the steel that held men together. A sharp knock shattered the quiet, echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot in the night. Heads turned, hands instinctively drifting toward concealed holsters. Troy's eyes narrowed, his calloused fingers tightening around his glass. No one knocked at this hour unless trouble was riding shotgun. He pushed off the stool, the floorboards creaking under his boots, and crossed to the heavy steel door. The peephole revealed a shadow shifting in the porch light, a kid, no older than 16, with wild eyes and dirt-streaked clothes, clutching something bundled against his chest. Troy swung the door open, the hinges groaning in protest, and cold night air rushed in like an uninvited guest. The boy, Eli, though Troy didn't know it yet, stood there, trembling not from the chill, but from something deeper, his face pale under the bruises blooming like shadows across his cheek. In his arms, a little girl no more than 5, her dark curls matted and her small body limp with exhaustion. She stirred slightly, a tiny whimper escaping her lips, and Eli shushed her with a desperate hush, his voice cracking. "Please," he whispered, his gaze darting past Troy into the dimly lit room, where a dozen bikers now watched in silence. "Can you hide my little sister tonight? Just till morning. They can't find her." The words hung in the air, heavy as the promise Troy had once made to a brother in arms, back when war had stripped them both bare. He saw it in Eli's eyes, the raw terror of a kid who'd run out of roads, the kind of fear that etched lines too deep for his years. Marks of haste marred the boy's hands, faint scratches from thorns or branches, and the girl's dress was torn at the hem, suggesting a frantic flight through the underbrush. Troy's jaw tightened. He'd turned away strays before, enforcing the club's iron rule. No entanglements, no liabilities in a world that chewed up the weak. But this was a child, wide-eyed and vulnerable, peering up at him with trust she had no reason to give. "Inside," Troy said, his voice a low rumble that brooked no argument. He stepped aside, gesturing with a nod, and Eli hesitated only a second before slipping past, the door thudding shut behind them like a vow sealed in iron. The room fell quieter still, the bikers exchanging glances, Jax with his perpetual scowl, Lena the only woman among them, her medic's kit always at the ready. Troy led them to a corner booth, away from prying eyes, and Eli eased his sister down onto the worn leather seat. She curled into a ball, thumb in her mouth, her breathing shallow but steady. "Who's they?" Troy asked, sliding into the seat across from them, his massive frame making the booth feel smaller. He kept his tone even, like coaxing a spooked horse, but inside, memories stirred. The echo of gunfire in distant sands, the face of a fallen comrade he'd sworn to protect but couldn't. Eli's hands fidgeted, twisting the frayed edge of his jacket. "Men from the mill," he muttered, eyes flicking to the floor. "My pa works there, owes them money. They came looking tonight, roughing him up. Said if he didn't pay, they'd take us, me and Luna. I grabbed her and ran. Please, mister, just hide her. I'll come back for her at dawn." Troy leaned back, the leather of his cut creaking, and studied the boy. Eli Ramos, he learned in fragments. Father a laborer in the dusty industrial sprawl outside town. mother gone to illness years back. The mill, a hulking relic of forgotten industry, was run by shadows Troy knew too well. Corrupt foremen with ties to worse, squeezing the life from folks like Eli's pa. Promises broken under the weight of debt, families torn apart. It hit Troy like a punch to the gut, reminding him of his own ghosts. A sister lost to the streets, a vow to shield the innocent that he'd buried under layers of leather and chrome. "You got a name, kid?" Troy asked, signaling to Lena for water and a blanket. Eli nodded, swallowing hard. "Eli, she's Luna." As the little girl accepted the blanket with a sleepy murmur, wrapping it around her like a shield, something shifted in the room. The bikers, sensing the pull of old oaths, began to move. Jax fetching a first aid kit, another brother dimming the lights to ward off any curious eyes from the road. Troy stood, placing a heavy hand on Eli's shoulder, feeling the boy's bones too prominent under his shirt. "No one's taking her tonight, or any night if it comes to that." The words escaped before he could stop them, a promise forged in the midnight knock, binding him to this unexpected charge. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, but inside the Iron Vow clubhouse, a fragile alliance took root, one that would ripple through the desert like thunder on the horizon, challenging the darkness that hunted the lost. As dawn's first light crept over the jagged peaks, painting the clubhouse in hues of gold and shadow, Troy watched Eli finally slump into sleep beside his sister. The boy had fought it, vigilant as a sentinel, but exhaustion won. Troy stepped out onto the porch, lighting a cigarette, the smoke mingling with the crisp morning air. He'd broken his own rule, letting them in, but rules bent when honor demanded it. Word would spread among the brothers by noon, a call to ride, to stand as the wall between the vulnerable and the storm. Little did he know, this midnight plea would unearth secrets from his past, forcing him to confront the promises he'd left in the dust and weave a family from the threads of strangers' desperation. The convoy would form soon, engines roaring to life like a heartbeat awakening. But for now, in the quiet before the ride, Troy felt the weight settle, not as a burden but as purpose. Luna stirred inside, her small voice calling for her brother, and in that sound, Troy heard the echo of redemption, a chance to honor the vows that time couldn't erase. The desert stretched endless before him, but for the first time in years, he wasn't riding alone. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace of shimmering heat waves that danced off the clubhouse's corrugated roof. Troy crushed his cigarette under his boot heel, the ember hissing out like a secret silenced, and pushed back inside. The air within carried a new undercurrent now, stale coffee brewing in the corner, mixed with the faint, clean scent of the blanket Lena had draped over Luna. The little girl slept on, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of the innocent, oblivious to the shadows gathering beyond the walls. Eli, though, was already stirring, his eyes snapping open at Troy's approach, wide and watchful, like a young wolf scenting danger on the wind. Troy pulled up a chair, its legs scraping against the concrete floor with a low growl that echoed his own unease. "You get some rest, kid," he said, his voice gravelly from the night's smoke and unspoken worries. "But we need to talk. Those mill hands, how many are we dealing with?" Eli sat up slowly, rubbing sleep from his eyes, but the tension in his shoulders never eased. He glanced at Luna, then back to Troy, weighing the trust he'd placed in this stranger's hands. The clubhouse felt smaller now, the bikers milling about with purposeful quiet, Jax checking locks on the back door, Lena restocking her kit with bandages that might see use too soon. 3, maybe 4, Eli replied, his words clipped as if speaking them aloud made the threat real. Big guys, with trucks that rumble like thunder. They work for Mr. Harlan, the foreman. Pa's behind on payments for the house. After Ma got sick, the bills piled up like sand dunes. They came last night kicking in the door. yelling about taking what was owed. I heard the cracks of fists on wood, Pa's grunts. I couldn't wait. Snuck Luna out the window, through the scrub. We ran till my legs burned, and this place. It was the only light I saw. Troy nodded, absorbing the story like a map unfolding in his mind. Harlan's name stirred old dust, whispers from years back, when the Iron Vow Riders had skirted the mill's edges, delivering aid to families squeezed dry by the same greed. Corruption festered there, a poison seeping from boardrooms to back alleys, where promises of fair wages turned to chains of debt. Troy had walked away once, after a brother lost his life in an accident that smelled of sabotage, vowing never to tangle with it again. But here it was, knocking at his door in the form of a scared boy and his sister. From across the room, Jax approached, his leather vest patched with the club's emblem, an iron chain encircling a vow etched in flame. At 38, with a scar running from jaw to collarbone, Jax was Troy's right hand, the one who'd pulled him from the wreckage of their last big ride. "Brothers are gearing up," he said, voice low, sliding a mug of coffee toward Eli. "Word's out. If those bastards come sniffing, we'll send 'em packing." His eyes, hard as flint, softened when they landed on Luna. Jax had a daughter once, lost to a custody battle twisted by lies. The sight of the girl tugged at threads he'd long buried. Eli accepted the coffee with a murmur of thanks, but his grip trembled. "I don't want trouble for you. Just keep her safe till I can get Pa out. He's tough, but alone." The boy's voice trailed off, the weight of responsibility carving deeper lines into his young face. Troy leaned forward, the table between them a barrier of scarred wood that mirrored his own battered soul. Memories flickered, nights in foxholes, swearing oaths to brothers who'd never see home. The sting of failure when one didn't make it. Protecting the vulnerable wasn't a choice, it was the promise that kept a man whole. Outside, the growl of engines stirred the morning calm as more bikes pulled up, chrome glinting under the relentless sun. The convoy was assembling, not with the fury of war, but the steady resolve of guardians awakening. Lena knelt by Luna, gently checking for signs of distress. Faint bruises on her arms, echoes of a rough handling that spoke of chaos without naming it. "She's a fighter," Lena whispered to Troy, her nurse's hand steady as she adjusted the blanket. "Like her brother." At 32, Lena had joined the club after pulling shifts in overrun ERs, drawn by the unspoken code, heal the broken, stand for the voiceless. Troy rose, clapping Eli on the back with a firmness that conveyed more than words. "You're not alone in this, son. Iron Vow doesn't turn away when the storm hits." He stepped to the window, peering through dust-streaked glass at the horizon where heat mirages twisted the road into illusions. Far off, a dust cloud hinted at movement, trucks perhaps, or just the wind playing tricks. But Troy knew better. Threats didn't wait for invitations. He turned to the gathering brothers, their faces a mosaic of resolve. Veterans with ghosts in their eyes, mechanics with oil-stained loyalty, all bound by vows forged in fire. As the morning wore on, Eli shared more fragments, the mill's looming silos like sentinels of despair, Pa's weary stories of better days before the debts swallowed them. Luna woke then, blinking up at the strangers with curiosity edging out fear. She reached for Eli, who scooped her close, and in that embrace, Troy saw the fragile core of what they fought for. Family not by blood, but by the unbreakable ties of protection. The clubhouse hummed with quiet preparation. Maps unrolled on the bar, radios crackling with scout reports, the scent of gun oil mingling with fresh-baked bread from Lena's hidden stash. By noon, the plan took shape, a ride to the mill's fringes, not to storm gates, but to draw eyes away, buy time for Eli to reach his father. Troy mounted his bike last, the engine's roar vibrating through his bones like a heartbeat renewed. Eli watched from the porch, Luna on his hip, her small hand waving tentatively. "We'll bring him back," Troy called over the din, his promise cutting through the noise like a blade. As the convoy thundered out, kicking up gravel in a wake of dust, the desert swallowed their path, but the echo lingered, a call to justice that no corruption could silence. Back inside, Eli held Luna tighter. The clubhouse now, a sanctuary echoing with the ghosts of rides past. He didn't know the full weight of what he'd unleashed, how this midnight plea would bind fates across the sands. But in the quiet after the engines faded, he felt it, a shift, like the first rain after drought, promising redemption not just for him, but for the man who'd opened the door. The sun beat down, merciless, but hope flickered in the shadows, waiting to ignite. The dust from the convoy's departure still hung in the air like a veil of unspoken oaths as Eli paced the clubhouse floor, Luna's small hand clasped in his. The room, once a bastion of rough camaraderie, now felt like a held breath, windows shuttered against the midday glare, the faint tick of that old clock marking seconds that stretched too long. Luna tugged at his sleeve, her voice a whisper-soft plea. "When's the big man coming back, Eli?" With Pa. He knelt to her level, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the bruises on his cheek throbbing like a reminder of the night they'd fled. "Soon, little moon. They're fast, like shooting stars." But inside, a doubt gnawed at him, a shadow born from too many broken assurances in their cramped shack by the mill. Lena watched from the bar, her hands idle for once, fingers tracing the edge of a coffee mug scarred by years of use. She'd seen kids like Eli before, eyes hollowed by the grind of survival, carrying weights no youth should shoulder. At her signal she approached, crouching with the grace of someone who'd mended more than bodies. "Hey, Luna, want to see something special?" She pulled a worn deck of cards from her pocket, the kind with faded pictures of desert blooms and iron horses, a relic from club runs past. Luna's curiosity sparked, her tiny fingers reaching out, and just like that the girl was distracted, giggling at a card that showed a rider silhouetted against a sunset. Eli exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing a fraction, but his gaze kept drifting to the door, as if willing the rumble of engines to return. Outside, the desert baked under the relentless sun, mirages twisting the horizon into false promises of water. Troy led the convoy along the cracked asphalt that skirted the mill's perimeter, his Harley rumbling like a beast awakened from slumber. The brothers fanned out in formation, 20 strong now, their cuts gleaming with the iron vow patch, a symbol of chains that bound rather than broke. Jax rode flank, his eyes scanning the scrub for any sign of pursuit, the wind whipping through his beard and carrying the sharp tang of creosote bushes. They'd chosen this route deliberately, close enough to draw attention, far enough to avoid a direct clash. No guns drawn, no threats hurled, just presence, the thunder of their engines a warning that echoed across the flats. Troy's mind raced ahead, piecing together the fragments Eli had shared. Harlan's mill wasn't just a factory, it was a web of favors and fears, where workers like Eli's pa traded sweat for scraps, only to find the scales tipped against them. Troy remembered a ride years back, delivering crates of supplies to families on the brink, only to watch the foreman's men torch a barn in retaliation. That night, under a sky bruised with stars, he'd sworn to his fallen brother, "We protect our own," but grief had driven him to isolation, the club his only anchor. Now, with Luna's trusting face burned into his memory, that old vow resurfaced, pulling him back into the fray like a tide he couldn't outrun. A dust plume rose in the distance, low and deliberate, not the wind's whim, but trucks grinding over gravel. Jax signaled, a gloved fist raised, and the convoy slowed, engines idling to a predatory growl. 3 vehicles emerged from the haze, battered pickups with mill logos faded on their doors, men in flannel and hard hats leaning out, faces hardened by the sun and something meaner. The lead truck halted, its driver, a burly figure with Harlan's stamp of authority, stepping down, arms crossed like barriers. "What the hell's this?" he barked, voice carrying over the heat. "Private road, turn your toys around." Troy killed his engine, the silence sudden and heavy, boots hitting the ground with a thud that mirrored his resolve. He approached unhurried, the brothers dismounting behind him in a wall of leather and loyalty. "Just passing through," Troy said, his tone even, eyes locking on the drivers. Up close, the man reeked of sweat and cheap tobacco, his knuckles scarred from more than labor. "Heard there's trouble at the mill, folks getting squeezed. We don't like that." The words weren't a threat, but a statement, laced with the moral weight of men who'd seen empires crumble under greed. The driver sneered, glancing at his crew, 4 in total, hands twitching toward tool belts that hid worse. "Mind your own, biker. This ain't your fight." But Troy saw the flicker, the uncertainty in how they shifted, eyes darting to the convoy's numbers. Jack stepped up beside him, a silent sentinel, while others fanned out, blocking the road without a word. It was a standoff etched in sunlight and shadow, the air thick with the unspoken, promises of protection clashing against the mill's corruption. Troy leaned in, voice dropping low. "Kid showed up at our door last night, scared, carrying his sister. Said you boys were hunting them for a debt. That true?" The driver's face tightened, a mask cracking under the probe. "Debts get paid. Family collateral if need be." The admission hung there, poisonous, and Troy felt the old fire stir, not rage, but the quiet fury of justice deferred. He didn't raise a fist. Instead, he nodded to Jax, who pulled a small recorder from his pocket, the red light blinking like an unblinking eye. "Good to know. We'll be sharing this around," the men muttered, engines revving as they backed off, tires spitting dust in retreat. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just the power of truth exposed, a poetic reckoning that left them scrambling. Back at the clubhouse, Eli froze as the door burst open hours later, the brothers filing in, with the scent of road dust and victory clinging to them. Troy entered last, his face lined but steady, and Eli's heart leaped. "Your pa's safe," Troy said, clapping the boy's shoulder. "We got him out, talked Harlan's men down, bought you time to sort the papers." Eli's knees buckled, tears carving tracks through the grime on his face as he hugged Luna close. Pa followed soon after, limping but whole, his eyes meeting Troy's in a nod of profound gratitude. The man, weathered by years at the mill, gripped Troy's hand. "You didn't have to, but God, thank you." The room filled with quiet celebration, beers cracked, stories exchanged in low tones. Lena tending to Pa's scrapes with gentle efficiency. Luna toddled over to Troy, offering him a crumpled drawing from her card game, a stick-figure family under a big bike. He took it, the paper soft in his calloused palm, and something inside him cracked open. A seam of light in the armor of isolation. This was the family chosen, forged in midnight knocks and desert rides, where loyalty outlasted the harshest storms. As evening fell, painting the windows in amber, Troy stepped out alone, the drawing tucked in his pocket like a talisman. The stars emerged one by one, witnesses to vows renewed. Eli's plea had unraveled threads of his past, pulling him toward redemption, but deeper shadows loomed. Harlan wouldn't yield easily, and secrets from Troy's own history whispered of greater threats. For now, though, the clubhouse glowed with fragile peace, engines silent but ready, the iron vow holding true against the night. The evening shadows lengthened across the clubhouse porch, stretching like fingers from the setting sun that bled orange into the desert sky. Troy leaned against the railing, the wood warm under his palms. still holding the faint vibration of the day's ride. Inside, laughter filtered through the screen door, Eli's tentative chuckles mixing with Pa's gravelly voice, recounting mill tales softened by relief. Luna's giggles rose like sparks, chasing away the remnants of fear. The air carried the savory bite of Lena's stew simmering on the stove, potatoes and venison blending with the ever-present undernote of leather and oil. For a moment the world felt mended, the Iron Vow's sanctuary a bulwark against the encroaching dusk. But Troy's gaze fixed on the horizon, where the mill's silhouette loomed faint and foreboding, its smokestacks like jagged teeth against the fading light. The recorder Jax had used weighed heavy in his vest pocket, a small device packed with Harlan's careless words, enough to stir questions, perhaps even draw eyes from higher up. Yet Troy knew men like Harlan didn't fold. They struck back, twisting debts into nooses. His own past echoed in the quiet. A decade ago, a similar stand against a corrupt outfit had cost him a brother, left him with scars that ached in the cooling air. He'd buried that vow deep. But Eli's plea had unearthed it, binding him anew to the fray. A low rumble broke his reverie, not the club's bikes, but something heavier, grinding from the east like an approaching storm. Headlights pierced the twilight, two sets weaving through the scrub, their beams slicing the gathering dark. Troy straightened, hand drifting to the knife at his belt, instinct honed from years of watching roads for trouble. The vehicles pulled up short of the gate, engines cutting to a guttural cough, and doors creaked open. Harlan himself emerged from the lead truck, a stocky man in his 50s, with a face like weathered granite, flanked by two shadows, hired muscle, their postures coiled. No mill logos this time. These were plain clothes, the kind that whispered of off-the-books dealings. "Troy Maddox!" Harlan called, his voice carrying the false warmth of a salesman, stepping forward under the porch light that flickered to life. "Heard you had a busy day. Playing hero for my workers now." The words dripped with insinuation, but Troy saw the calculation in his eyes, the flicker of a man cornered, probing for weakness. Behind him, the clubhouse door swung open, Jax filling the frame, his presence a silent warning. Eli peered out too, face paling. Luna clutched to Pa's side inside, her small form a reminder of what hung in the balance. Troy descended the steps unhurried, boots thudding softly on the packed earth, the scent of creosote rising sharp from the ground. "Just keeping promises, Harlan. The kind you seem to forget when debts call." He stopped a few paces away, the space between them charged like the air before lightning. The foreman's men shifted, hands in pockets that bulged suspiciously, but no moves were made. Yet, Jax joined him, a wall of solidarity, while Lena watched from the window, her medic's instincts alert for any sign of escalation. Harlan chuckled, a dry rasp that didn't reach his eyes. "Promises? Boy's pa owes me $5,000, house, tools, the works. You interfere, and it's not just him paying. Club like yours. Well, roads get rough, permits vanish, friends in town turn sour." The threat was veiled, poetic in its corruption, painting a picture of institutional squeeze. The sheriff's office turning blind, suppliers cutting lines, the slow strangulation of a brotherhood built on freedom. Troy felt the old pull, the moral crossroads where honor clashed with survival. He'd walked away from the mill before, after whispers of rigged accidents claimed lives, vowing silence to protect what remained. But silence had festered, leaving ghosts. Eli stepped forward then, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "It's not right. What you do. Pa's worked those lines since I was born. Ma's gone because of the stress, the hours. You take everything." Pa laid a restraining hand on his son's shoulder, eyes weary but fierce, the lines of labor etched deep. Harlan's gaze flicked to them, a predator assessing prey, but Troy interposed, his bulk blocking the view. "Walk away, Harlan. The tape's already out. Folks will hear how collateral means kids in the night. Justice finds a way, even in the dust. The foreman paused, the wind whispering through the sagebrush like a chorus of unseen witnesses. His men exchanged glances, the standoff stretching taut, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote. Finally, Harlan spat into the dirt, the glob dark against the earth. "This ain't over, Maddox. Debts don't vanish with a ride." He turned, signaling his crew, and the trucks growled back to life, taillights fading into the night like retreating embers. The air settled, heavy with the promise of reprisal, but the clubhouse stood unbroken. Inside, the tension uncoiled slowly. Pa sank into a chair, accepting a bowl of stew from Lena. His thanks murmured like a prayer. Eli hovered near Luna, who colored quietly on a scrap of paper, her world shrinking to crayons and safety. Troy poured whiskey for the brothers, the amber liquid glinting in low light, a toast to the fragile victory. "We bought time," he said, voice low, circling the group. "But Harlan's web runs deep. Tomorrow we dig, find the threads to pull it apart." Jax nodded, his scar catching the lamplight, a map of loyalties tested and true. Lena added bandages to the kit, her presence a steady anchor, reminding them that healing followed the fight. As the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky, Troy sat with Eli by the fire pit outside, flames crackling softly, casting dancing shadows on their faces. The boy spoke of dreams deferred, school sidelined for shifts, Luna's laughter a rare light in their dim home. "You didn't have to do this," Eli said, staring into the embers. "But you did, like family." Troy's throat tightened, memories of his own lost kin surfacing, the sister he'd failed, the war buddy whose vow he'd carried alone. "Family's chosen, kid. In the knocks at midnight, the rides through storms, we hold the line." The conversation wove into plans, contacting old allies, a veteran network with ties to Fairwatch groups, exposing the mill's rot without flames. Suspense hung ethical and thick, dilemmas of conscience, weighing exposure against risk, the psychological toll of standing firm in a cynical world. Luna toddled out, climbing into Eli's lap, her warmth a bridge between strangers. Troy watched, the fire's glow illuminating the quiet redemption unfolding, promises ancient as the desert itself binding them tighter. Yet in the hush, Troy sensed the gathering clouds. Harlan's retreat, a feint perhaps, with deeper forces stirring. His past secrets, buried under club oaths, threatened to surface, testing the iron vow's steel. The night air cooled, carrying the faint rumble of distant thunder, a harbinger. But for now the circle held, loyalty's fire burning bright against the dark. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The fire pit's embers glowed like fading stars in the pit of night, casting elongated shadows that danced across the clubhouse yard. Troy shifted on the weathered bench, the wood groaning under his weight, as Eli's words lingered in the cooling air. The boy's confession had peeled back layers Troy hadn't touched in years, dreams of a life beyond the mill's grind, of Luna growing up with books instead of bruises. The scent of burning mesquite mingled with the distant tang of rain on the wind, a rare promise in the arid expanse. Troy nodded slowly, his silver-streaked beard catching the firelight, eyes reflecting the quiet resolve that had carried him through foxholes and fallen brothers. "Holding the line's what we do, Eli. It's the vow that keeps the dark at bay." Luna, nestled against her brother's side, yawned, her eyelids heavy, the day's chaos fading into the safety of their makeshift family. Inside, the clubhouse hummed with subdued energy, lamps casting warm pools over the scarred tables, where maps and notes now sprawled like battle plans. Jax pored over a faded ledger, his thick fingers tracing routes that snaked around the mill's territory, while Lena brewed chamomile tea, the herbal steam rising like a soothing fog. Paramos sat nearby, nursing a bandaged hand, his face a map of gratitude etched with exhaustion. The stew's remnants cooled in bowls, the room filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked solace amid the leather and chrome. But beneath it all pulsed an undercurrent of tension, the ethical tightrope they walked. Expose Harlan's web without igniting a war that could consume them all. Troy had seen corruption's tendrils before, how it choked the innocent, turning justice into a casualty of convenience. This time, with Eli's trust hanging in the balance, retreat wasn't an option. As midnight approached, the group gathered around the central table, the old oak surface scarred from countless oaths sworn over whiskey. Troy unrolled a larger map, its edges frayed, pinning it with a rusted knife that glinted under the bulb. "Harlan's not done," he said, voice steady as the desert floor, pointing to a cluster of dots marking the mill's outer warehouses. "That tape Jack's caught, it's leverage, but he'll bury it under lawyers and lies. We need proof, witnesses, ledgers, anything that shows the squeeze on families like yours." Eli leaned in, his young face sharpening with determination, the fear from the night before hardening into purpose. Pa cleared his throat, adding fragments. Names of co-workers silenced by threats, shipments diverted to pad Harlan's pockets, debts inflated like mirages in the heat. Jax grunted, his scar pulling tight as he spoke. "Got a contact, old army buddy runs a supply depot north. He owes me from Nam days. Can get us eyes inside by dawn." The plan unfolded like a slow reveal in the flickering light. A discreet ride at first light, scouts slipping into the mill's shadows while the main convoy drew patrols away. No raids, no confrontations. Just the quiet work of truth-gathering, the moral artistry of dismantling greed without bloodshed. Lena's brow furrowed, her medic's pragmatism cutting through. "And if it goes south, wounds heal, but grudges fester." She glanced at Luna, now asleep on a cot in the corner, her small chest rising and falling like a fragile metronome. The room fell silent, the weight of sacrifice settling, a psychological crossroads where loyalty tested the soul's edges. Troy met each gaze, his own past rising unbidden, a mission gone wrong in sun-baked foreign lands, where a promise to shield a village elder ended in ambush, leaving him with ghosts that rode shotgun on every highway. He'd founded the Iron Vow to atone, a chosen family of outcasts bound by unbreakable codes. "We ride smart," he replied, the words of vow renewed. "For the kids who knock at midnight, for the pa's who break their backs, redemption's in the stand we take." Eli nodded, a spark igniting in his eyes, the boy transforming before them from fugitive to ally. Pa gripped his son's shoulder, the gesture speaking volumes, a silent pact forged in the club's unyielding light. The night wore on, the wind picking up outside, rattling the shutters like impatient fingers. Troy stepped out for air, the porch creaking under his boots, the vast desert unfolding under a canopy of stars that seemed closer, witnesses to their fragile alliance. He lit a cigarette, the match flaring brief and bright, smoke curling upward like released secrets. In the distance, thunder rumbled low, a storm brewing over the peaks, mirroring the turmoil within. Harlan's visit had been a probe, but Troy sensed deeper currents. Rumors from old rides hinted at ties to city syndicates, corruption that reached beyond the mill's rusted gates. Exposing it meant risking the club's fragile peace, dredging up Troy's buried history. A sister entangled in similar webs years ago, lost to the streets after he'd turned away, too scarred from war to intervene. The guilt twisted like barbed wire, but Eli's plea had snapped it loose, demanding he face the mirror. Back inside, the planning shifted to contingencies. Escape routes etched in Eli's memory of the scrublands, signals for Lena to coordinate from the clubhouse. Jax shared stories of past stands, his voice a gravelly anchor, tales of veterans pulling together against odds, their loyalty a shield stronger than steel. Luna stirred once, murmuring in her sleep, and Eli soothed her with a lullaby their mother had sung, the melody soft and haunting, weaving emotional threads through the room. It was these moments, the human core amid the strategy, that fueled them, the poetic justice of ordinary hearts defying systemic rot. By the time the clock struck 2, exhaustion claimed the edges, but resolve burned steady. Troy assigned watches, Jax taking first shift by the window, his silhouette a sentinel against the night. Eli curled up near Luna, his breathing evening out, trust earned in the hours of shared vulnerability. Pa retired to a bunk, his snores a testament to weary relief. Lena dimmed the lights, her presence lingering like a guardian spirit, ready to mend what the dawn might break. Troy lingered at the map, fingers tracing the path ahead, the knife's hilt cool under his palm. The storm's edge brushed the horizon now, lightning flickering silent and blue, illuminating the desert's vast indifference. This ride would test them, not with fists, but with the quiet courage of truth's pursuit, the redemption of promises kept against all reason. As rain began to patter on the tin roof, a rare cleansing in the dust-choked land, Troy felt the shift. A family expanding, bonds tightening like chains of iron vow. Harlan's shadows loomed, but in the heart of the clubhouse, light held firm, a beacon for the lost, promising dawn's justice over the storm's fury. The night deepened, suspense coiling ethical and thick, as the riders prepared to chase the truth through the gathering dark. Rain pattered steadily on the clubhouse roof as dawn broke, grey light filtering through the shutters like a hesitant promise. Troy stood at the window, watching the first drops trace erratic paths down the glass, the desert awakening under a veil of mist that softened the jagged peaks. The air inside carried the earthy scent of wet sage seeping through cracks, mingling with the sharp bite of coffee, brewing strong and black. Sleep had come in fits for him, haunted by fragments of old rides, engines roaring through downpours, brothers' faces lit by lightning, vows tested in the deluge. Eli stirred on his cot, Luna still curled against him, her dark curls damp from the humidity, a small hand clutching his shirt like an anchor. The group assembled quietly, movements deliberate in the pre-storm hush. Jax zipped his rain-slicked jacket, the zipper's rasp cutting the quiet, while Lena packed a satchel with essentials. Flashlights, notebooks, her steady hands betraying no tremor. Paramos nodded from the corner, his bandaged knuckles flexing as he accepted a thermos from her. "Be careful out there," he murmured, voice rough with the weight of a father's vigil. Eli rose, hugging Luna close before passing her to Pa, his eyes meeting Troy's in a silent exchange of trust, forged overnight. "We'll get the proof," Eli said, the words of vow echoing the club's own. Troy clapped his shoulder, feeling the boy's resolve mirror his own buried fire. Engines coughed to life outside, a low chorus muffled by the rain, tires crunching wet gravel as the convoy formed. 10 riders this time, scouts pared down for stealth. Troy mounted his Harley, the seat slick under his gloves, rain beading on the chrome like tears unshed. The storm had eased to a drizzle, but thunder grumbled distant threats, the sky a bruised canvas overhead. They rolled out in tight formation, headlights cutting foggy paths through the scrub, the scent of ozone sharp in the air. Jax rode point, navigating the back roads that skirted the mill's patrols, mud splashing up in arcs that painted their boots and leathers in earthy protest. The mill emerged from the mist like a slumbering beast, its silos looming through the haze, rain sluicing off corrugated roofs in silvery sheets. They split at the perimeter fence, chain link glistening with droplets, Troy and Jax veering toward the warehouse district, while the others held position to signal any approach. Dismounting in the shadow of a rusted shed, they moved like ghosts, boots sinking into sodden ground that sucked at each step. The air here reeked of damp metal and stagnant water pooling in potholes, the distant hum of generators a mechanical heartbeat underscoring the tension. Troy's pulse matched it, memories surfacing unbidden, a rain-soaked night in foreign jungles, promises whispered to a dying comrade, the moral ache of choices that lingered like scars. They slipped through a gap in the fence, barbed wire snagging Jax's sleeve with a faint tear, and crouched behind stacked crates stamped with faded mill logos. Inside the nearest warehouse, voices echoed faintly, workers starting shifts early, their murmurs laced with resignation. Jax pulled a small camera from his vest, its lens hooded against the wet, while Troy scanned for the ledger room Eli had described. A prefab office tucked in the back, guarded more by neglect than locks. "This way," Troy whispered, the words barely audible over the patter on the tin roof. They darted between shadows, hearts pounding in ethical rhythm, not thieves, but seekers of truth, balancing the risk against the redemption of exposing rot. The door yielded to Jax's pick, a soft click lost in the storm's murmur, and they entered a dim space cluttered with files and flickering fluorescence. Rain drummed overhead, a natural cover for their intrusion, the air thick with musty paper and ink. Troy rifled drawers methodically, fingers brushing yellow documents that chronicled the mill's underbelly. Inflated invoices, worker logs doctored to hide overtime unpaid, notes on collections that named families like the Ramoses. One sheet caught his eye, a ledger entry for Eli's PR, debts ballooned by interest that bordered on usury, tied to Harlan's signature in bold scrawl. Jax snapped photos, the shutter's whisper urgent, capturing the evidence that could unravel the web, but footsteps sloshed outside, heavy and deliberate, freezing them in place. A shadow passed the frosted window, the silhouette of a night watchman pausing to light a cigarette, the match's flare brief and orange through the glass. Troy's breath caught, the psychological vice tightening. Confrontation here meant more than capture. It risked the fragile peace they'd built, endangering Luna's sanctuary back at the club. Jax pocketed the camera, signaling retreat. But as they eased toward the door, a voice barked from the hall. "Who's there?" The watchman, younger than expected, with the wary eyes of someone complicit but conflicted, pushed in, flashlight beam sweeping like a blade. Troy stepped forward, hands raised, his bulk filling the doorway, rain dripping from his beard. "Easy, friend. We're not here for trouble." The man's beam steadied on them, widening at the iron vow patches, recognition flickering. Rumors of the club's rides had spread through mill whispers. Jax tensed beside him, but Troy pressed on, voice low and steady, appealing to the moral undercurrent he sensed. "Saw the books. Harlan squeezing folks dry, kids running in the night. You got family here?" The watchman hesitated, beam wavering. The rain's rhythm amplifying the standoff's suspense. His face, illuminated in harsh light, cracked with doubt, the ethical dilemma etching lines as he glanced at the open ledger. "Get out," he muttered finally, stepping aside, voice thick with his own buried vows. "But take what you need. Harlan's poison. My brother's one of his collections." No alarm raised, no pursuit, just a quiet defection. The power of shared humanity turning the tide. They slipped away into the downpour, evidence clutched tight, the warehouse fading behind like a chapter closing. Mounting up, engines roaring muffled through the wet, they rendezvoused with the scouts, the convoy reforming under sheets of rain that washed the mud from their path. Back at the clubhouse by midday, the storm spent, leaving the desert steaming under a clearing sky. Troy burst through the door, water pooling at his feet, the camera extended to Eli like a talisman. "It's enough," he said, as the boy pored over the prints, Pa's eyes lighting with vindication. Lena brewed fresh coffee, the aroma grounding the room, while Luna clapped at the returning heroes, her laughter a balm. Jax recounted the narrow escape in low tones, the group's relief palpable, bonds tightening in the afterglow of moral victory. But Troy's gaze drifted to the window, where fresh dust clouds hinted at movement on the horizon. Harlan's response brewing, perhaps, the deeper secrets of his past, stirring like thunder's echo. The evidence was a weapon now, promises of justice solidifying into action. Calls to allies, plans to present it to town, oversight without flames. Eli hugged Troy fiercely, the boys whisper, "You gave us a chance," stirring the redemption Troy had long chased. Yet suspense coiled tighter, psychological shadows lengthening as Harlan's web contracted, threatening to ensnare them all. In the clubhouse's warm heart, loyalty held, a chosen family riding toward dawn's reckoning, where honor's quiet stand would face its fiercest test. The desert whispered of trials ahead, but the iron vow rode on, unbreakable. The clubhouse door swung shut behind the last rider, sealing out the post-storm hush as water dripped from jackets onto the concrete floor, pooling like scattered coins of relief. Troy peeled off his gloves, the leather sodden and heavy, hanging them by the wood stove, where flames crackled softly, chasing the chill from bones chilled deeper than the rain. The air inside thickened with the rich, grounding scent of Lena's coffee, mingling with the faint metallic tang of wet earth seeping through the vents. Eli stood frozen for a beat, the printed photos trembling in his hands, his eyes tracing the damning scrawl of Harlan's name like a boy unearthing buried treasure. Paramos leaned against the bar, his weathered face cracking into a rare, full smile, the lines around his eyes deepening not with worry, but with the dawn of possibility. Luna scampered over from her corner play, crayons forgotten, wrapping her arms around Eli's leg with a squeal that pierced the room's tension. "You back! Big rain, go bye-bye!" Her voice, bright and unscarred, cut through the adults like sunlight through clouds, pulling a chuckle from Jax as he shook out his beard, droplets scattering like sparks. Lena moved among them, distributing towels and mugs with the quiet efficiency of a frontline healer, her own relief hidden behind a steady gaze. "Evidence like this," she said softly, peering at the photos over Eli's shoulder. "It's the kind that sticks. Harlan's web unravels from the truth." The words hung there, a moral anchor in the ethical storm they'd navigated, reminding them that justice wasn't forged in thunder, but in the steady light of exposure. Troy crossed to the table, spreading the prints alongside the map, the paper curling slightly at the edges from the damp. His fingers, calloused and scarred from grips on handlebars and triggers long past, traced the connections. Debts manipulated, families targeted, a pattern of corruption that snaked from the mill to town ledgers. Memories stirred unbidden. The face of his sister, lost to similar shadows years ago, a plea ignored in his war-weary haze. He'd ridden away then, burying the vow under miles of highway, but Eli's midnight knock had dragged it to the surface, raw and demanding. "We take this to the county oversight tomorrow," Troy rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "No rides, no standoffs, just the facts laid bare. Let the light do the work." Eli nodded, setting the photos down with care, his young shoulders squaring as if the burden had lightened into purpose. "Pa always said truth's the only debt worth paying." Pa clasped his son's hand, the gesture simple yet profound, a father's pride blooming in the club's unyielding warmth. Jax poured rounds of coffee, the steam rising like exhaled promises, and the group settled into the rhythm of planning. Calls to a retired judge ally, copies routed through secure channels, the quiet machinery of accountability. Outside, the desert steamed under the emerging sun, sagebrush glistening, the storm's fury spent, leaving the air crisp and alive with potential. Laughter broke through now and then, Luna's antics drawing smiles, her presence the emotional core binding them tighter, a chosen family woven from desperation and dawn. But as evening painted the windows in deepening gold, a low engine growl announced uninvited company, headlights sweeping the yard like searching eyes. The room stilled, hands pausing mid-motion, the fire's pop suddenly loud in the hush. Troy rose first, peering through the blinds, his jaw setting as Harlan's truck pulled up, flanked by a sleek black sedan that screamed off-the-books authority. A suit from the city, no doubt, come to tie loose ends. The foreman stepped out, rain jacket discarded, his granite face set in grim lines, the suit trailing like a shadow puppeteer. Jax moved to Troy's side, a silent bulwark, while Lena ushered Luna and Pa to the back room, her voice a soothing murmur amid the rising tension. Troy opened the door before they could knock, the hinges sighing like a held breath, cool twilight air rushing in with the scent of drying mud. Harlan didn't expect company so soon. The foreman's eyes narrowed, flicking past him to the gathered faces, calculating the odds. The suit, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a clipboard clutched like a shield, cleared his throat. "Mr. Maddox, we're here on official business. Allegations against the mill, serious ones. Care to explain these?" He waved a folder, copies of the photos already in hand, the web closing faster than anticipated. Suspense coiled psychological and thick, the ethical precipice sharp. Harlan's corruption exposed, but at what cost to the vows holding them together? Harlan spat to the side, his voice a venomous drawl. "You bikers think you can play savior? This town's mine. Debts, jobs, the works. Push this and your club's permits dry up, roads close, friends, they'll vanish." The threat landed heavy, poetic in its institutional poison, but Troy stood unmoved, the iron vow patch on his chest, a badge of deeper loyalty. Eli emerged then, photos in hand, his voice steady despite the tremor. "It's over. The ledgers show it. Families broken for profit. No more kids running in the night." Pa stood beside him, unbowed, the duo a testament to resilience born of quiet honor. The suit adjusted his glasses, flipping through the evidence, his face paling as the pattern emerged undeniable. Harlan lunged forward, face twisting, but Jax's hand on his shoulder halted him cold, a grip like iron. "Easy. Truth's riding in now." Minutes stretched taut, the desert wind whispering through the scrub like unseen allies, until the suit nodded slowly. "This warrants investigation. Full audit starting tomorrow. Mr. Harlan, you'll need to come with me." The foreman deflated, curses dying on his lips as cuffs clicked softly, the moral justice unfolding not in violence, but in the unyielding light of facts. He was led away, truck keys tossed to Pa as restitution's first gesture, the sedan vanishing into the dusk like a bad dream retreating. The door closed, the clubhouse exhaling as one, the fire's warmth reclaiming the space. Eli hugged Pa fiercely, Luna peeking out to cheer, her small victory dance pulling laughter from the depths. Troy watched, the weight lifting like storm clouds parting, redemption settling soft as desert rain. His sister's ghost quieted, the vow fulfilled in this circle of chosen kin. Beers clinked in toast, stories flowing of rides past and futures bright, loyalty's legacy etched in every scarred table and steadfast gaze. Jax clapped Troy's back, Lena's smile genuine, the family expanded, unbreakable. As night fully cloaked the yard, stars wheeling overhead like witnesses to honor's quiet triumph, Troy stepped out alone, the drawing from Luna still in his pocket, a talisman of promises kept. The mill's lights flickered distant, dimmed by justice's rise, Harlan's empire crumbling under truth's weight. No shadows loomed now, only the road ahead, open and calling, where sacrifices birthed hope and midnight knocks built empires of the heart. The iron vow endured, a beacon in the sands, riding eternal toward redemption's horizon. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the desert of promises and loyalty. If these tales of chosen family and moral courage resonate with you, please subscribe for more stories that honor the unbreakable human spirit.